Hey everybody, I want to talk about something really briefly that I personally think is probably the most important stage and form of training in all of the curriculum development activities that we're working on. One of the stages that we discussed in the book, and this matches fairly well with the idea of tiered learning, where you learn, then you understand, then you apply what you've learned. So you learn in a very isolated method, that would be learn, and then you understand in a manner that exposes additional context that helps you better understand that very isolated bit of information, and then you transfer or apply. We typically stay away from the word transfer, we use the word apply here, but apply your learning in a free-form setting, in a setting outside of the classroom. So, if you did an individual math problem versus doing a word problem versus getting a job out of school, those are equivalent analogies to those three phases of learning. So from a skill development perspective, and as you construct and provide drills to your students, they should help match and support those levels and stages of learning. And so what we're talking about recently is the idea that when you're practicing isolated skill development, you're really looking at a set of inputs and responses that are relatively fixed. And so what this means is essentially this is kind of the one-off stage where if a certain thing happens to you, then you are hoping that your ingrained response to that particular input shows up when you need it. And so it's an important stage of the process, but critically important to move past once those skills have been tested and you know that that student owns them. At that point, you can probably you either go into maintenance mode on that skill set by performing some drill periodically to make sure that any perishable skills stay active in your hands, or that skill, you look to identify that it becomes a component part of some broader set of drilling that you're doing later. So let's say, if you can walk and you can also chew gum, then you don't practice those ever in isolation again. You walk and chew gum at the same time going forward. That way you don't have to fall back to only chewing gum while standing still. So again, I'm throwing out a lot of analogies. I'm hoping these make sense as I'm describing them. So, in terms of inputs and responses, it's important. This is the one-off stage where you're doing isolated skill development. What's critical is this middle stage, because the last stage really is that free-form platform. It's irikumi, it's sparring randori, it's bridge hand sparring in totality. It's fighting. It's the closest things you can do related to fighting without too many rules, right? So the idea is it's a low rule set environment. Now, in the book, we discuss a sticky hands platform that meets that criteria, but it actually describes the inputs and outputs, inputs and responses in a real specific tiered way, so that you go through 5 stages. Even when you get to that step and you open up the process, we discuss 5 stages so that you can learn that sticky hands platform as a laboratory to drop a specific input into, so you can develop further understanding. So I jumped from the first to the last. Let me go to the middle, where I think it's really important. So this selection stage really helps you understand the context of any given skill. So for instance, the one example we give in the book is the idea of managing obstructions. So the idea is that the person learning the skill punches and they're obstructed. The attacker doesn't want to get punched by the defender, so the attacker blocks that hand. Now, depending on where on the arm, it's going to elicit a different response. We learned all 3 isolated responses, fixed inputs. I learned as a student, that if somebody touches my forearm below my elbow, that I typically will roll. If I'm pushed deeply at the crease of my elbow into my core horizontally, that I'll pull and open. And then if I'm pressed down, I'll flow around typically. So those would be the 3 examples in the book, and those are isolated skills. But what's critically important is that you move into a platform area where there's different inputs. So, what you want to do is give the student a platform like that where they punch and they receive a different feeling or something coming in, but let's go with feeling first. So the feeling is where my arm is pushed. here or there. I want to work on the feeling. So to develop my ability to move around instructions, I would want to make sure I learned the 3 isolated component solutions and then work into a variant but limited set of options in the training platform. So another example might be, let's say the student's practicing blocking. Well, it can be hard at high speed even to tell if a punch is coming high or middle. So the differences in how you block between high or middle should become variant. So the variant nature of that can be different arms. So it can be, I'm either being punched with the right or the left, and I won't know ahead of time, so I've got to invoke the proper hand skill, not based on memory, but based on random inputs of left or right punches. Or I could just say, well, it's a right punch is going to be coming in. It could be high or middle, and what I'm training the student to do is use their eyes to understand the body language that's being presented, so that I know if it's going to be a straight punch or a looping haymaker or something of that nature. So I want you to really consider the idea that there is tremendous value here, and a lot of effort should be put into this component of the training. One of my teachers, Guru Mark Wiley of Integrated Eskrima, also my 5 Ancestor instructor, he talked about the integrated modular method. So the idea that you can you learn a component, you learn another component, and then your next stage of learning, the third thing you do, is then figure out how those things fit together. And I think that's incredibly true of just about any martial art. So integrating what you know based on the selection of the material, being fed different angles, different hands, different timings, critically important. I think well before you send people off into the freeform platform, because if you send them there without the tools to really understand how to behave, then what you're going to end up is people devolving back to things like a kickboxing platform. Anyhow, that's my opinion. That's where we're spending a lot of time trying to make sure that people have good skill development, and much of that happens here at that second stage. I welcome your feedback. Let me know if you have any questions or what your next topic should be. Thanks.